It's part 2 of Welcome Back. Or should I say, welcome back to part 2. Yesterday, we discussed how I had a problem in my fish holding system and my attempts to try to resolve it or minimize any potential further issues. I also mentioned I was going to go down and buy some fish to kind of stock up so I'd have something to sell, and I decided I wanted to share that with you. So we've got 2 boxes of fish here. We need to start acclimating, and the first way to start acclimating is what I refer to as light acclimation. As you can see, 2 boxes. The first one there is no cover or lid on, and other than the blanket that I had draped over that so it wouldn't get any direct sunlight on the way home, it's already open, and the fish are able to adjust to the light in the room as opposed to total darkness as within the second box. This one here is sealed shut. Those fish, for all intent and purpose, are in a dark environment, and we don't want to just open the box and start tossing bags of fish into the system. I want to actually take a moment, cut open the box, and allow the fish to kind of get used to that change in light. So what we're going to do is open up the boxes and just allow the bags of fish, which are still sitting inside the box, to with fish to adjust to the lighting in the tank. But I need to figure out first how to open the box. It appears as though it's quite well sealed. Oh, slowly open up the box and see there's a bunch of fish in there that are probably freaking out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just allow the box to sit here for a little bit so that the light can, that the fish will kind of get used to that light before I start putting them up there in the tanks. But one of the things we need to do first before I even start putting fish up there is I had mentioned to you that I had purchased some damselfish about 2 weeks ago and put in those tanks that were freshly cleaned out, not only to help kind of reestablish the biological in there, but mostly just to make sure that the system still didn't have something in there that was going to wipe out any of the new fish that I bought beyond just those damsels. So I need to go and catch those damsels and put them in different tanks.
Damselfish are known as the starter fish in the saltwater portion of the aquarium hobby. They're tough fish and they're inexpensive fish. Unfortunately, their tough reputation ends up being the result of their territorial nature. It's due to this territorial aspect that quite often they are, and get blamed for, the death of new tank mates. Of all the damsels, I find that the yellow-tailed blue damsel is the least territorial, but that's not always the case. To help my system reestablish itself, and also to act as a canary in a coal mine, I previously placed into these newly cleaned tanks damsels. I'm now in the process of removing those damsels to make room for the new fish. The damsels will be clustered together in a few of the tanks at the bottom row.
One of the things that you'll notice in all these little tanks is either a little coffee cup, maybe a flower pot, sometimes a piece of PVC pipe, maybe it's even a piece of live rock. What it serves is a way of creating sanctuary, a place for the fish to go and hide inside the tank. Keep in mind, they've been yanked out of their ocean about a week ago, mixed in with a whole bunch of other people, put into plastic bags, put into boxes where it's completely dark, into a couple of different new tanks, so it's rather traumatic with what they've gone through just to get here. That doesn't include getting into the customer's tank, but that's the next step. This step here is to try to calm the fish, try to allow him to adjust to a captive environment, try to encourage him to become comfortable with aquarium foods, whether it be a flake food or a frozen food. But anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself. As I mentioned, pieces of live rock, pieces of PVC pipe, old coral skeletons, and even flower pots. All of the tanks will have something in there so that the fish can go and hide, especially when they get mixed with another fish that might be slightly aggressive towards them.
The calmer and more comfortable you make the fish, the more likely he's going to begin to eat and come out of hiding. This will increase the likelihood of them swimming out front and being much more sociable.
So as I mentioned, there's a lot of these little coral frags and plugs that I can put inside the tank, and that kind of appeals to butterfly fish, which tend to want to get in and pick on things. Now here's a little tidbit you might find helpful. One of the more difficult fish to keep or to get to switch over to frozen foods is a copper band butterfly. That beautiful silver with those burnt orange stripes on there, very attractive butterfly. It's got a bit of a snout on there, and that should be an indication that it's a picker. It wants to pick on things. And so, because it's a popular fish, one of its things that you have to do is to get it to feed on frozen or flake foods. And to encourage it to do so, just by dumping it in at the top of the tank, it may not always go for it. So a lot of times if you have an old clam, or clam shell I should say, that you can take and put a rubber band around and put the food inside the clam, and the butterfly will come up and begin to pick out of there. Again, they're a picker and they want to pick. So that's one of the ways of going about it. Now not everybody has clams or clam shells. So I saw something the other day that was rather clever. It was a very simple piece of PVC pipe they had drilled a whole bunch of holes into and put a cap at one end and a cap at the other end. And then you can take the cap off, put the food inside there, put the cap back on, put it inside the tank, and the butterfly will want to pick through the little holes in there, and he'll try to go after the food. So that's a little tidbit that you may find helpful in trying to get some of those more difficult to eat fish to eat. So now that we've allowed the fish to kind of acclimate to the light in the system, we're ready to start putting the fish away into the tanks.
Placing the various bags of fish into the tanks allows for more acclimation, but it also needs to be done with fish compatibility in mind. The fish going into the tanks have to get along with each other. You would not mix small clownfish with a large porcupine puffer. It's important to create a peaceful environment for the fish to do their best.
Okay, so we've got all the bags of fish up in the various tanks, and at this point it's a little bit like Christmas morning. It's kind of fun to release all the fish, but you have to stop and think before you release those fish. Two things. One, they still need to acclimate. Now in this particular case it's acclimation to water temperature. Unlike a lot of people who suggest an actual water acclimation, dipping water in the bag, and I also do tend to suggest that as well because it doesn't hurt to minimize the transition. I don't have that ability here to do that, so I'm going to allow these bags to float in their respective tanks, predominantly just for temperature acclimation. Now the other thing that I was going to mention is you have to kind of be aware as to what fish are going to get along with each other in which tanks. You wouldn't want to put, say, a Niger trigger in a tank with a bunch of clownfish. You'd end up with a fat Niger trigger and no clownfish. So I've gone through and kind of looked inside the bags and determined what was in the bag and what would work best with those same fish in the same tank. So come on back for the break, or after the break, and we'll start releasing the fish and show you, as well as discuss a little bit of preemptive medicinal benefits, as well as a little bit of a freshwater bath.
He used to buy 600 gallons of ocean water every 2 weeks. Now he makes his own for a third of the cost. He designed, bred, and services jellyfish tanks on a regular basis, but has never been stung. He cleans some of the finest aquariums in town, but never finds enough time to clean his own. He makes 200 gallons of purified water at one time, then dumps a bag of salt into it. He has solved long-term hair algae problems using algae against themselves. He is the most interesting fish guy in the world.
I don't always make DI water, but when I do, I prefer SpectraPure. Stay pure, my friends.
Receive a $50 LA Fishguys discount on a SpectraPure Max Cap 90 5-stage RODI water purification system. Just call or go online to SpectraPure.com and mention or enter LA Fishguys coupon code LAF MAX50 to receive your LA Fishguys $50 discount. Are you still tumbling biopellets? Tired of constantly replacing your GFO? Or trying to grow algae in your refugium? And you still have algae problems? Get real. Real filtration, that is. Algae scrubbers from Santa Monica Filtration will turn this into this by growing this weekly. 2 styles of scrubbers, the Hog and the Surf. Both are extremely easily installed and noticeably effective. You want results? Algae scrubbers are the answer. Visit santa-monica.cc. Do you have an aquarium question? Are you looking for aquatic answers? Just key in wetwebmedia.com. Wet Web Media has information on freshwater, marine, brackish, and planted aquariums. Wet Web Media is staffed by the capable Wet Web Media crew. Check today's facts, ask questions, or search keywords. That's wetwebmedia.com.
So it's been about an hour that the bag's been floating, temperature acclimating into the system. I've got a couple of buckets set up here, one with a net. I'm going to start introducing the fish into the tanks. We'll start down at this end. These happen to be the various fairy wrasses, and I've got 2 different species here. I believe what is called a yellowhead or yellow face wrasse, and then down here would be velvet wrasses, or some might refer to them as rose-colored head wrasses or something to that effect. Since those fish are jumpers, I've got this little piece of egg crate here that I'll end up putting over across the top of the tank, and I'll come up with something to put over the top of that tank. Most of the time I don't have too many issues with jumping fish, but there are those that do tend to jump out, and we've got a series of lids down there that we can use for that particular purpose. So let's go ahead and start introducing the wrasses into the system. Start first by popping the bag. Get your finger in the hole there. Hand inside, spread apart, pour through the net, thus straining the water and the fish only out, and then putting it into the tank.
Most of the fish can go directly into the tanks. Some of the fish, on the other hand, may require another step before I put them into the tank.
So I've got the wrasses and the clownfish released now. What remains are the different butterfly fish. And since butterfly fish typically have flukes, the same with angelfish, I'm going to give all the butterfly fish a freshwater bath before they go into the system. And a freshwater bath is exactly that. It's a bath of fresh water that we're putting a saltwater fish into. The idea being that the saltwater organisms have adjusted to a density of, say, X, and when you put them into an environment where that density is different, knowing that salt wants to seek the greater moisture, it's going to move towards that lower salinity, I guess, or lower density. And the more radical that is, the more radical the effect. And of course, the smaller organisms are affected first. So what I'm going to do is put the fish into the fresh water. I'll be counting out about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. What I'm looking for is either the parasites themselves to begin to boil or jump off the fish, or not, or the fish has nothing on him at all and there's nothing there. At that point, I can then take them out and put them into their tank. We'll go ahead and start here with the Facula butterflies. They're a very attractive butterfly. They're actually a very hardy butterfly, as butterfly fish go. And I'm going to put him straight into that fresh water. And then I'm going to observe him with this little flashlight. And around 60 seconds, if he's got anything in the way of parasites on him, they should begin to make themselves apparent. And to a certain degree, it's very obvious when they're coming off. You can see them literally boil or blister up, I guess would be the word. A lot of times they're underneath the scales or on the eye lens itself.
The point of the freshwater bath is to relieve the fish of parasites quickly and easily, which allows for a less stressful adjustment to captivity. But it also narrows down which medications I need to use to continue to treat the fish.
And I really don't see anything on him at all. He's not stressed out at the moment. And so I'm feeling pretty confident that I can lift him up or net him up and put him into the tank. Now that can be sometimes a little bit stressful to the fish, some fish more than others, but certainly it's a whole lot less stressful than having to deal with a serious case of parasites, flukes, or whatever.
I have a number of butterfly fish today and will apply this process to all of them. And as long as I can keep track of who went into the bucket when.
Now if you get too many fish going in the bucket at one time, there's a tendency to not be able to recognize which fish went in first. In this particular case, I did note the size of them. And the medium was in there first, the small was in there second, and the large is in there third. To a certain degree, I've lost count of my 90 seconds. But the fish are not stressed out at the moment. I don't really see anything coming off on their sides. But I think I'll start moving them into their tank now.
Quite often, I'll use my hand to capture and lift the fish up into the tank. But sometimes, it's easier and less stressful on the fish if I just net him and then lift him into his new home.
Now, I don't know if you can see this, but you see those odd opaque scales on the fish, at least the scales that tend to stand out? They're either scales that are pushed out because they've been in a coral or something, or those are flukes that have been underneath the scales and they're now in the process of working their way out as a result of the fresh water. And this butterfly is not taking the acclimation or the freshwater bath real well.
Flukes are flatworms that hide underneath the scales of the fish, inside the gills of the fish, and sometimes even over the bulbous eye lens of the fish. They feed on the mucus and fluids of the fish, and as with most parasites, will eventually cause the demise of the fish.
A lot of times you can actually see the fish do a shimmy because they're uncomfortable with the bugs that are walking around on their body. Now, I haven't seen anything actually come off, so that may actually just be beat up fins. So we've released all of the fish. I've got a couple pair of copper band butterflies and some clownfish There's the Pakistani butterflies down there. I think there's some double saddle butterflies here. These are Facula butterfly fish. There's a pair of Ocellaris there. A previously brought in copperband and tomato clown. I think these are teardrop butterflies. And then down here are the peach face wrasses. And back in there are the velvet wrasses. So everybody's in the system now. I think I may move that copperband. She seems a little out of place at the moment, out of sorts. Over here, these two butterflies seem to be doing well, but they are at opposite ends of the tank, so maybe I will leave her there. But facing the wall like that is not necessarily a good sign, so I'm going to keep an eye on her. Now, the next thing that I want to do is put a little bit of food in there, and probably will be some mysa shrimp. That usually gets their attention based on the smell, and the whole idea is to get them to start eating right away. Later on tonight I will probably start with my first round of medications, since I kind of suspected flukes on this one down here, but then again I did not see anything in the bucket that resembled flukes either coming off the fish or floating around as a result of coming off the fish. So I think tonight it will be a copper-based medication, which is kind of just a general therapeutic approach. Cupramine will be my medication of choice, and as opposed to their full dosage, I will probably just do a half dose, which out of 310 gallons, typically it's 1 milliliter per 10 gallons of water, which in this case would be 30, or in this case 31 milliliters of copper. I'm going to just do it in half doses, so it'll be a 15 milliliter amount of copper I'll add tonight and 15 mils tomorrow. It may not be as therapeutic as quick, but it's not as harsh on the fish. And so, as I mentioned in the previous part, and also at the beginning of this particular part, welcome back. It's good to be back. It's fun to be back. I've got a lot more episodes to show you, and my apologies it took so long to get to this point, but sometimes you have to take the long way to get back to the right way. So until we speak again, keep moving forward.